Welcome, Cancer, to your year 2026 deep dive forecast. I'm going to share with you initially some of the big themes that I feel are going to be manifesting for you in the new year. But we also need to be mindful of the solar return as we enter 2026. Those energies provide a backdrop for the entire 12 months. And there is one particularly fantastic combination of energies in your opposite sign of Capricorn, which could prove very, very positive in terms of relationships. But as you come into this new year, we need to think about the energy of your sign. You're ruled by the moon, but you are a cardinal sign. So each year when the sun returns to the sign of Cancer with the summer solstice, that's your time to really radiate out all your special qualities. But cardinal signs are about leadership. And yet, right at the start of this year, the moon is actually tucked up in your 12th house, which could see you entering 2026 maybe a little bit tentatively, maybe feeling a bit unsure about what lies ahead. And part of the reason for that is that year 2025 was a lot to do with communication. But having the concept of communication doesn't mean to say that the lines of communication always work particularly well, because the energy of the solar eclipse of the 21st of September 2025 was challenged by the strident, restrictive vibe of Saturn in the part of your chart to do with higher values, anything to do with contracts, the law, travel, modes of travel too, higher education. So whatever you were thinking about achieving in terms of your self-expression, it's possible in the latter part of 25, and as you come into this new year, you could feel a little checked. I want to reassure you, however, that with Neptune followed by Saturn returning right to the top of your chart, particularly Saturn is not at its best in the sign of Aries, which is about new beginnings, and it is the beginning of a new 29-year cycle because Saturn had that first blush into Aries last year, and its total cycle is 29 and a half years. But for you, the 10th house represents very Saturn-like energies. It's about hard work, discipline, application, responsibility, and taking that lead and being someone who can share your wisdom and knowledge in a very profound way. So even though there may be some extra responsibilities coming to you this year, I wouldn't see Saturn and Neptune being in Aries as a necessary negative, but it's possible that if you're someone who's more of a free spirit, perhaps a bit more of a bohemian, and you're trying to exist in some kind of corporate environment, that could prove somewhat more challenging. So the dialogue or the communication or the conversation, which was a big part of last year because of the axis between the signs of Virgo, everyday chat, and Pisces, the more ephemeral sign of Pisces, watery like yours, has meant that perhaps as you come into this new year, you're not quite sure of the landscape, and that's completely understandable. Now, the other thing to tell you is that Mercury, the planet of communication, is going to go through 3 lots of watery retrogrades this year. But I feel that that can work to your advantage. The first one, which occurs on February the 26th through to March the 20th, is in Pisces. And because of that energy, the next eclipse we have, the lunar eclipse on March the 3rd, when the sun is in Pisces, but it will be in Virgo. Once more, that's amplifying the need for careful communication if you want to convey your ideas to be heard in the way that really works for you. But there are some stress points at the start of this year, to be honest, because although Mercury goes through 3 retrogrades, including in your own sign, which will be from June the 29th through to July the 23rd, which is 24 days, it may feel at times this year that it's a bit stop-start in terms of expressing those ideas. Even the third one, which is in Scorpio from October the 24th to November the 13th, that's going to influence your social and perhaps even romantic situation. Those cross wires could come because maybe your instincts are so highly tuned that at times it gets more difficult to read the runes. But I don't think it's just going to be because of Mercury, and I will share with you what I feel the bigger picture is around communication this year. It's important as a water sign to be in touch with instincts because your ruler, the moon, is very protective. But at times it can be a little bit subjective when it comes to how you think. So, for example, when Mercury is in Cancer, that's not an easy hoe. However, what is going to happen this year is we have a new eclipse series that starts to emerge from February the 17th, initially in Aquarius. Now, a eclipse is when the sun and the moon are in unison, so they're working in common support of one another. It's just that the sun in Aquarius, it's not its favourite position, it's in its detriment. But the moon in the 8th house can also bring up some fears, perhaps even subconscious fears. And so over the following 6 months, when it comes to where you're most invested, shared finances, intimacy, that may be an area that you need to work at. And that's why keeping the lines of communication open is very important. So don't get too, if you can, don't get too influenced if someone you encounter doesn't necessarily have the same worldview as you. Because one of the things that I feel Cancer people can do, if you feel the challenge, there may be a tendency at times to actually withdraw because you don't like direct confrontation. But I feel this year, particularly Saturn, is urging you to actually take a step forward into the daylight. If you do need to take on a lead and be persuasive about your ideas, even if at times people aren't necessarily hearing or getting what you're saying, keep the faith, because the move of Uranus into your 12th house for the second time after its initial 5-month visit on the 26th of April suggests over the next 7 years there are going to be lots of things shook up out of your subconscious, but it can be very powerfully positive. But Jupiter, of course, has been in your sign since the end of May last year, but unfortunately, if you recall, was challenged by Saturn in a very powerful way, an exact square on June the 15th. But as we come into this year, if there is something that you're invested in terms of hope, faith, a spiritual identity, the things you're inspired by that go beyond the material, Jupiter does actually give you quite a lot of support. It is in a square on that solar return with Chiron, so if you're feeling in some way or another that your voice doesn't get heard when it comes to your professional situation, it does really fall to you not to withdraw. Keep pushing out, even if it is at times requiring a lot of courage, because one of the things that I don't feel does get stated about your sign is your tenacity. You know, you can be tough. If you need to be, you can be very resilient, and that's a great quality. But just withdrawing, it's not always a good way to be. And I feel this year is really encouraging you not to follow that default. It's more about engagement rather than disengagement to protect. It sounds good, scuttle under the sand, it keeps you safe, but it also stops you nibbling any goodies on the beach. So stay available. I feel this is really important for you, Cancer. Now, in terms of your home and feelings part of your world, ironically, it is going to be the autumnal equinox on September the 23rd that really brings in a 3-month period where some good things can happen. There is the final eclipse, which I mentioned before, on the 28th of August in the Virgo Pisces series. This one is in Pisces. And once more, it may flag up the need to keep those lines of communication open. But what we also have towards the end of July is the nodal axis inverts into Aquarius. So where that Aquarius solar eclipse could be quite challenging, I feel, because it does clash with Uranus. So something that's been hidden could come into the open in a powerful way in the following 6 months. But I feel the node, the point of destiny, the North Node's encouraging you to listen to your instincts. And the 8th house in some ways, although it's very much to do with evolution, transition, sometimes letting go of what's not working for us. It can also be about where we're heading to put more devotion in. And there may be a period where it feels quite dislocating for you. If you're separating from something that hasn't been a success, you could feel the pain of that quite strongly, but keep pushing outwards. I think this is the way to go, because once we have the second solar eclipse of the new series in Leo on August the 12th, that gives you a chance to really improve your sense of foundations, of self-worth, of your sense of your identity, but also your financial situation can improve through the second half of this year. So keep going, and I'm going to share with you now your solar return. But just before I go into that, I want to share with you about my unique offer. You can order your personal natal forecast for year 2026 now, and I'll give you the rest of this year free. But also you'll get 30% off the individual prices, and you'll get your life roadmap report in my special package. That really helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. All of us, it's totally unique to each person, but understanding those patterns and matching them to the forecast will help you to make your moves in the new year much more shrewdly. But also in my special offer, you'll get your free general zodiac forecast for each of the 12 signs, but also your Chinese forecast, your Vedic forecast, and your love forecast too in my special booklets. Please see the link below for more. So on the screen now, Cancer, you can see your solar return, and what I was referring to, the big three, the posse in Capricorn, your opposite sign. Now, having Venus there along with Mars, but so closely coalescing around the Sun, so the midpoint between them, literally on the Sun. If you're wanting to bring a new relationship into your world or improve a pre-existing one, there's a great opportunity there by engaging. But the fascinating thing in a natal chart, if you have Mars in, or someone has Mars in the 7th house, they can be very assertive to the point that it's hard going for other people. But part of it can also be to do with defensiveness, because the 7th house may be where we connect, it may be where we find equilibrium and balance. But when Mars is in the mix, it can be where we're quite combative. But what I feel Venus does, Venus in the 7th house, is at home. It loves being there. It's much more delicate, sensitive and coquettish. It softens Mars. So if you encounter someone, as this year goes on, who really does make your pulse race, and they're prepared to keep the dialogue going, just like I feel you should, this could be a relationship that really starts to gain traction and could become so much more meaningful. The other thing about that combination, if you are wanting to revive a tie that has not necessarily had its finest moments in recent times, it's all about trying to listen better. And that's where having the Mercury retrograde in water signs is such a critical thing this year, because we can have a discussion, but we don't necessarily, our recall of that discussion doesn't necessarily match the words that are exchanged, because people feel what's been expressed in different ways. And I think that's a very Cancerian trait. And a mum who's Cancer. So I feel Cancerian people can find it tricky if they feel that some incoming is coming their way. But I would say step into it. Use Mars's support to step into it, but still be constructive. Keep the lines of communication open. So that's a wonderful alliance for you. In terms of Mercury, the communicator, for the 3rd year running, it is debilitated. It's in a very brittle part of your chart, and it's interesting because Sagittarius is a very flexing sign, it's mutable, can be very open-minded, but it's saying to you, don't be sloppy about details this year. It's also in a square with Neptune and Saturn, but also the Sun Moon midpoint, which is the yin yang of the chart. If we think your Moon is very much, your rulers are very much receptiveness and nurture, support, can be empathetic, very caring. The Sun's much more about action. The two together is the blend of the more masculine and more feminine energies, not based on gender. So the combination of those two in Pisces, in a water sign, but very close to Saturn, suggests that when it comes to anything to do with contracts, that could be a tricky arena this year. And because of the Mercury square, if you are discussing anything to do with a legal matter, perhaps it is to do with a divorce or alimony or dividing assets, or it's a business negotiation, being very precise about the details is vital, because Neptune particularly can distort in that square with Mercury in a really quite challenging way. But also I draw your attention to the moon, your ruler. It's in your 12th house. Now it's in a fine link with Pluto in Aquarius. If you're open to diving deep, that combination helps you. What's more challenging is the moon's angle, not so much to Venus, but I feel to the sun. So they're in a quincunx. So again, your subconscious can play quite the role in how you're trying to relate to people. And that's really the challenge of this year, because in a way, Saturn particularly is pushing you into the limelight, whether you like it or not. People can find your words, your ideas, your mode of expression captivating, believe that, but also it is important to try to blend together that more logical, cerebral part of your nature with that more feeling part of your nature, but make sure that the distortion that comes from the square between Mercury and Neptune isn't influencing your judgment and your rationality. I'm not saying that you're going to have many moments of the year, but there could be some key times when you feel sort of overwhelmed by the demands of situations, like we all do. This is part of the human state. And just remember that Jupiter in your sign that's a delightful opportunity right through to the end of June. But once Jupiter moves, what it can do for you is bring extra money, along with that solar eclipse in the sign of Leo from August the 12th. So I think the second half of this year can see you doing much better in terms of income and resources. But Jupiter also starts this year in a square with Chiron. If you do feel that your career hasn't quite worked out recently, and maybe you feel you put everything into it, try to think about what you can learn from the experience. I feel that life is almost like a series of bridges. We can do particular roles or have particular experiences with people, whether it's family members or partners or friends. Sometimes it's something that's joyful and we celebrate. Sometimes it's profoundly disappointing. But each time we make our way to the next bridge, we're much wiser from the knowledge that we've got. And when we go over a series of bridges, particularly if we trust the process, it will take us, if we listen to our instincts, which is your gift, as long as you don't overthink things, keep the dialogue going and let other people's viewpoints come in, that actually can animate this year in an incredibly positive way. Just one thing to say, that Venus the relator is going to be going into retrograde on October the 3rd in your sign of romance, sector of romance, and it does wind back into a more feeling sector. So if there is a relationship you're not quite sure of, it could show up at that time. And yeah, it is also true to say that there is the Mercury retrograde in your sign, which is going to go across June the 29th, as mentioned, to July the 23rd. That could be a time when you feel a bit bogged down. You may have to go over old ground, but Mercury retrogrades are such an opportunity to review, redo, and go again. And that's what you can learn from that experience. So even if there are times this year, Cancer, when it does feel there's a lot of emotion going around, particularly around communication and conversation, keep the drawbridge down, because I actually feel it will be very much to your advantage. And there is a very exciting last half of the year in terms of enjoying creature comforts, great food, getting together with people and exchanging things, perhaps even sensual moments. But that Jupiter and solar eclipse alliance in the second half of this year, and the North Node going into Aquarius at the end of July, will, I think, offset some of the challenges of that Aquarius solar eclipse of the 17th of February, and also Saturn being right at the top of your chart. Have a great year. Please check out patrickarundell.com for more information.